On April 23rd, the body of a young woman was discovered in Chicago, and this murder set off a chain of events that shook several families and exposed a web of lies woven from passion, money, and betrayal. Jaleel Butler's apartment was located in a quiet neighborhood of Chicago, where row houses stood close together and the streets were lined with parked cars. On the evening of April 16th, Kiana Devereaux lay on a wide bed, covered with a snow-white sheet, watching Jaleel button his shirt in front of the mirror. His movements were measured, habitual. He was getting ready for some family event he had mentioned in passing. Jaleel was a large 41-year-old man with a neatly trimmed beard and attentive dark eyes. He worked as a sales manager for a large distribution company, which provided him with a stable income that allowed him to support his family and spend money on Kiana at the same time. He turned to her, and a slight smile flashed across his face. "Do you need anything?" he asked, taking his wallet out of his jacket pocket. Kiana propped herself up on her elbow, her long dark hair spilling over her bare shoulders. She was a beautiful 28-year-old woman with smooth cocoa-colored skin and expressive brown eyes that could look at him as if he were the only man in the world. "You always take such good care of me," she said softly, watching him count the bills. Jaleel placed the money on the bedside table, $800, as usual. That was enough for her for a week, or so he thought. "I want you to have everything you need," he said, approaching the bed and kissing her on the forehead. "You know how important you are to me." Kiana took his hand and squeezed it in hers. "You're incredibly important to me too, Jay. You're the only one who really understands me. I'm so grateful to fate that you're in my life." Jaleel smiled wider. He liked hearing those words. At home, his wife, with whom he had been living more out of habit than love for a long time, and two teenage children immersed in their phones, were waiting for him. And here was Kiana, young, admiring him, sincere. At least that's how it seemed to him. "I have to go, baby. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Sure. Drive safely." When the door closed behind him, Kiana lay motionless for a few more seconds, then got up, gathered the bills, and neatly folded them into her purse. She got dressed quickly and without ceremony: skinny jeans, a beige sweater, a light jacket. 20 minutes later, she was behind the wheel of her rented white sedan, driving across town to her apartment. Kiana rented an apartment in a new residential complex on the north side of Chicago. It was a modern building with a glass facade, a concierge in the lobby, and panoramic windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The apartment was spacious: a living room with a leather sofa and a large TV, a bedroom with a large bed, and a bathroom with a jacuzzi. The rent was $2,500 a month, but Kiana easily covered that amount. She threw her bag on the sofa, kicked off her shoes, and went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of white wine. It had been a good day. Jaleel had been generous and predictable, as always. She took out her phone and checked her messages. 2 missed calls from Trevon. Kiana smiled. Trevon had always been so persistent. She dialed his number, and he answered on the first ring. "Kiana, I thought you were ignoring me," he said, his voice sounding relieved but slightly hurt. Trevon Kyle was 6 years older than Kiana, worked as an accountant at an insurance company, and was the only one of her 5 men who wasn't married. He was genuinely in love with her, and she knew it. That made him both the simplest and the most dangerous of them all. "I'm sorry, honey. I had a rough day. I'm so tired I can barely make it home," she lied softly, settling down on the couch. "You work too much, Kiana. You need to rest more. Maybe we could go somewhere for the weekend? I could book a hotel room and we could spend time together. Just you and me." Kiana closed her eyes. She had to be careful with Trevon. He always wanted more time, more attention, more commitment. "That sounds wonderful, Trey. But you know, I'm in a bit of a bind right now. I'm having trouble paying my rent this month and I don't know what to do." There was a pause on the line. Then Trevon asked quietly, "How much do you need? I don't want to burden you, really. You already do so much for me." "Kiana, please. I want to help." "How much?" She pretended to hesitate. "Well, if I had $600, that would solve the problem." But I realize that's a lot of money, and I don't want to. I'll send you the money right now, he quickly interrupted. You'll have it in a few minutes. And Kiana, I love you. You know that, right? Kiana's heart skipped a beat, not because of her feelings for Trayvon, but because of a pang of guilt, which she quickly suppressed. I love you too, Trey. You're the best man I've ever met. You're the only one who really cares about me. Then I'll see you tomorrow? Maybe we can have dinner together? Sure. Call me in the morning and we'll set a time. When the conversation ended, Kiana took a sip of wine and leaned back on the sofa. A minute later, a transfer notification popped up on her phone. $600 from Trayvon. She smiled. In just one day, she had earned $1,400 without even trying. She spent the next couple of hours relaxing. She took a shower, did her nails, and watched an episode of her favorite TV series. Around 8 in the evening, the doorbell rang. Kiana looked through the peephole and saw Charisse Griffith, her best friend from college. Charisse was a short, plump, 29-year-old woman with short hair and a perpetually ironic expression on her face. She worked as a bank teller, lived in a rented studio apartment on the other side of town, and envied Kiana's lifestyle, although she never admitted it out loud. "Girl, you look amazing," Charisse exclaimed, hugging her friend. "Is that sweater new?" "I bought it last week." Kiana nodded, letting her in. "Would you like some wine?" "Are you kidding?" They settled on the sofa, and Charisse looked around with admiration, making no attempt to hide it. "I'm always amazed at how you manage to live in a place like this. It must cost a fortune." Kiana shrugged. "I have my ways. That's exactly what I want to talk about." Charisse moved closer, a curious sparkle in her eyes. "Come on, tell me. How are things with your boyfriends? Still juggling all 5 of them?" Kiana smiled and took a sip of wine. "You make it sound like it's complicated. It's actually pretty simple if you organize it right." "Simple? Kia, you have 5 men at once. Jalil, Trayvon, Demetrius, Kieran, and Omari. 5. And each of them thinks he's the only one. How do you keep it all straight?" "It's all about planning," Kiana explained, taking out her phone and opening her calendar. "Look, Jalil meets me on Mondays and Thursdays. He supposedly has meetings after work on those days. Trayvon is free on Wednesday and Friday evenings. Demetrius can only meet during the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays when his wife is at work. Kieran comes on Saturdays and Omari on Sundays. Everything is scheduled, no overlaps." Charisse shook her head with a smile. "And each of them gives you money?" "Of course. Jalil gives me $800 a week. Trayvon usually transfers $500 or $600 when I ask him to. Demetrius gives me $700 every 2 weeks. Kieran gives me about $1,000 a month. Omari is the most generous. He pays my entire rent, $2,500. Charisse whistled. "If you add it all up, that's over $6,000 a month. God, Kiana, you're a genius. You live better than most people with normal jobs." "This is my job," Kiana replied calmly. "It just requires different skills. You have to be attentive, remember details about each of them, know what they like to hear. Jalil likes to feel important and needed. Trayvon wants romance and sincerity. Demetrius is looking for the passion he doesn't have at home. Kieran just wants a beautiful woman by his side to make him feel younger. And Omari, he's the most complicated. He wants a little bit of everything." "Aren't you afraid that one of them will find out about the others?" Charisse asked, a slight alarm in her voice. Kiana waved her hand dismissively. "They don't even cross paths. Jalil lives in the south, Trayvon in the west, Demetrius in the suburbs, Kieran in the east, Omari in the north. They work in different fields, go to different places. They have no chance of meeting. And even if they did, how would they know they were connected to the same woman?" "It still sounds risky." "Life is a risk, Charisse. But I'm in control of the situation. I'm always in control of the situation." The friends talked for about another hour about various things: a new TV series, Charisse's colleagues, plans for the summer. When Charisse was about to leave, she hugged Kiana at the door and said quietly, "Be careful, okay? I know you're smart and all, but men can be unpredictable when it comes to feelings." Kiana smiled. "Don't worry about me. I've got everything under control." After Charisse left, Kiana sat back down on the sofa and opened the calendar on her phone. The coming week was packed. Tomorrow, Wednesday, dinner with Trevon. The day after tomorrow, a meeting with Demetrius in the afternoon and with Jalil in the evening. Friday was Trevor again. On Saturday, Kieran had promised to take her to an expensive restaurant. And on Sunday, Omari planned to spend the whole day with her. She looked through the list, made a couple of adjustments, and set reminders. Then she sent each of the men a short message for the night. Something personal, something special for each of them. She wrote to Jalil that she missed his hugs. To Trevon, she wrote that she thought about him before going to sleep. To Demetrius, she hinted at tomorrow's meeting. To Kieran, she wrote that she was looking forward to Saturday. To Omari, she wrote that she was grateful to him for everything. When all the messages were sent, Kiana turned off the light in the living room and went to her bedroom. She lay down in bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and closed her eyes. She was warm, comfortable, and calm. Her life was perfectly organized, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. Detective Alan Cresswell stood at the entrance to an apartment complex on the north side of Chicago and watched the flashing lights of police cars reflected in the glass facade of the building. It was early evening on Wednesday, April 23rd, and the air was filled with that special spring chill that made people turn up the collars of their jackets. Cresswell took a drag on his cigarette, a habit he had been trying unsuccessfully to kick for the past 5 years, and looked at his partner. Detective Tyra Morrison got out of their sedan and walked over to him. She was 8 years younger than Cresswell, but she was often the one who set the tone in their partnership. Tyra was perceptive, quick to pick up on details, and skilled at talking to people in a way that made them open up to her without even realizing it. "What do we have?" she asked, zipping up her jacket. A woman, 28 years old, found dead in her apartment. A neighbor discovered the body around 5 in the evening when she came to feed the cat. The victim was supposed to give her the keys yesterday but didn't answer her calls. The neighbor became concerned and asked the doorman to open the door. Cause of death? Multiple stab wounds. Preliminary estimate is last night or early this morning. They walked through the lobby, where the concierge, an elderly man with a shocked expression, was giving a statement to a patrol officer. The elevator took them to the 8th floor. A crime scene investigation team was already working at apartment 812. The detectives put on gloves and shoe covers and went inside. The apartment was spacious and obviously expensive. White walls, modern furniture, panoramic windows overlooking the lake. But all this luxury contrasted with the horrific scene that unfolded in the living room. Kiana Devereaux lay on the floor between the sofa and the coffee table. She was dressed in casual clothes, gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, now soaked with blood. Her body lay on its back, arms spread out to the sides, eyes open and staring at the ceiling with a frozen expression of horror. There were at least 6 stab wounds visible on her body, in her chest, stomach, and neck. Cresswell crouched down next to the body, trying not to step on the bloodstains. He had seen hundreds of corpses in his career, but it was impossible to ever get completely used to such a sight. It was always a reminder of the fragility of human life. "Looks like a crime of passion," he said quietly. "Too many blows, too chaotic. Not a professional. Someone who lost control." Tyra walked around the apartment, carefully examining every detail. She looked into the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Then she returned to the living room and shook her head. No signs of forced entry. The door was locked until the concierge opened it. It may have slammed shut when the killer left. The windows are closed too. She let the killer in herself. So she knew him. Cresswell stood up and looked around. Her bag is on the sofa. Her phone is on the coffee table. Her wallet is in her bag. The money is still there. "This isn't a robbery," Tyra agreed. "There are obviously expensive things here. A TV, a laptop, jewelry in the bedroom. The killer didn't come for that." The medical examiner, a short woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, approached the detectives. "The preliminary time of death is between 8 p.m. yesterday and 2 a.m. today. I'll be more precise after the autopsy. The murder weapon was a knife with a blade about 15 to 18 centimeters long. There were 6 penetrating wounds, 2 of which were fatal, to the heart and carotid artery. There are virtually no signs of a struggle. Perhaps the first blow was sudden, and the victim did not have time to react. "Was the weapon found?" Cresswell asked. "No. The killer took it with him." The detectives went out into the courtyard and began questioning the neighbors. The apartments on that floor were expensive and were occupied mainly by young professionals or wealthy elderly couples. But none of the neighbors could provide any useful information. There were no cameras in the building. An elderly couple from the apartment across the hall claimed they hadn't heard anything. They had hearing problems and usually watched TV at high volume in the evening. A middle-aged man from the neighboring apartment said that he had returned home from work at around 11 p.m. the previous evening and had gone straight to bed. A woman with a child from the apartment next door assured them that she had spent the entire evening at home but had not heard any screams or noise. The walls were thick enough to block out sound. The only one who knew anything about the victim was the neighbor who found the body, Mrs. Eldridge, a woman in her 60s with a kind face, now pale with shock. "I hardly ever spoke to her," she said, clutching the cup of tea the patrolman had brought her. "She was a nice girl, always said hello when we met in the elevator or in the lobby. Sometimes I saw her with different men, but I'm not one to stick my nose into other people's business. She asked me to feed her cat because she was going away for a couple of days. At least that's what she said. I agreed. But when she didn't answer my calls, I got worried. And then I went in and saw." The woman couldn't continue, and the detectives didn't ask her any more questions. Returning to the victim's apartment, Cresswell and Morrison began gathering personal information. A driver's license in her wallet confirmed her identity as Kiana Devereaux, 28 years old. Her phone contained numerous contacts, photos, and messages. Forensic experts seized the phone for detailed analysis. "We need to contact her relatives," said Tyra, leafing through a notebook she found in a desk drawer. Cresswell found a contact in the phone labeled Mom. He dialed the number, and after a few rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello? Good evening. This is Detective Alan Cresswell from the Chicago Police Department. I'm looking for Mrs. Devereaux, Kiana Devereaux's mother." "Yes, that's me." "Has something happened?" Alarm immediately appeared in her voice. Cresswell paused. This was always the hardest part of their job. "I'm very sorry to have to tell you that your daughter Kiana has died. Her body was found today in her apartment. We are investigating the circumstances of her death." There was a dead silence on the line, then a muffled sob. No, that's impossible. I spoke to her on Sunday. She was fine. What happened?" "We can't disclose all the details yet, but this is a homicide investigation. I need to ask you a few questions. Where are you right now?" "I'm in Indiana, in Fort Wayne. My God, my girl, my baby." Cresswell waited patiently for the woman to calm down a little. Then he asked the necessary questions. Mrs. Devereaux said that Kiana had moved to Chicago 3 years ago and worked as a hotel manager, as far as she knew. She didn't have any serious relationships. At least she never told her mother about anyone in particular. Enemies? No, Kiana was a sweet girl. She couldn't have had any enemies. When the conversation ended, Cresswell rubbed his nose. A headache was coming on, a sure sign of a long night of work ahead. "A hotel manager," Tyra repeated thoughtfully. "We need to check her workplace, find out who her friends and colleagues were. Judging by this apartment, she earned more than a typical hotel manager," Cresswell remarked. "The rent here is at least $2,000 to $2,500 a month, plus a car, clothes, everything else. Either she had a very good income or someone was helping her," Tyra finished. They continued their search, and Tyra found a small notebook in the bedroom, hidden in a bedside table drawer under a stack of magazines. It contained names, phone numbers, dates, and amounts of money. The names were repeated regularly: Jalil, Trevon, Demetrius, Kieran, Omari. "It looks like our victim had an interesting personal life," said Tyra, showing her find to Cresswell. The next day, April 24th, the detectives continued their investigation. An analysis of Kiana's phone showed active correspondence with several men, frequent calls, and plans for meetings. But the most valuable contact was that of her friend, Charisse Griffith, who worked as a teller at a bank on the west side of town. The detectives arrived at the bank around noon. Charisse agreed to talk to them in the conference room. When she entered, it was clear that she had been crying. Her eyes were red and her face was swollen. She was holding a crumpled tissue in her hands. "I can't believe Kiana is gone," she said in a trembling voice. "I saw her just a week ago. We talked, we laughed. Who could have done this?" Tyra sat down opposite her and spoke in a soft, soothing tone. "Sheris, I understand how difficult this is for you, but we need your help to find the person who did this. Tell us about Kiana. What did she do? Who were her friends? Did anyone threaten her?" Sheris shook her head. She was a complicated person. She loved the good life, nice things. She hadn't worked for the last 2 years. Instead, The woman fell silent, clearly hesitating. "Go on," Cresswell urged her gently. "Anything you say could help us find the killer." Sheris took a deep breath. She had men, several men at once. They gave her money, paid for her apartment, bought her gifts. She called them her sponsors. I didn't approve of it, but she was my friend, and I couldn't judge her. "How many men?" Tyra asked. 5. I know their names because she told me. Jalil, he was married and worked for some sales company. Trevon was an accountant, the only single one of them all, and he was truly in love with her. Demetrius was also married and worked in a warehouse. Kieran was divorced and worked in logistics. And Omari was married and worked in a hospital or clinic. I don't remember exactly. The detectives exchanged glances. 5 men, and each of them could be a suspect. "Did they know about each other?" asked Cresswell. "No, that was the whole point. Kiana made sure they never crossed paths. Each had his own day of the week, his own time. She told each of them that he was the only one. She was very organized in that regard." "Do you know their last names?" "No, just their first names. But Kiana must have their contact information in her phone, or in that notebook she kept." "When was the last time you saw Kiana?" "On Wednesday. I came to see her in the evening. We talked, drank wine. She was planning her meetings for the following week. Everything was as usual." "Did she seem scared? Worried? Did she say that someone was bothering her?" Sheris shook her head. "No, she was calm, even happy. She felt like she was in control of the situation." After talking to Sheris, the detectives returned to the station and began searching for the 5 men. Using phone records, bank transfers, and information from Kiana's notebook, they were able to identify all 5 within a few hours. Jalil Butler, 41 years old, sales manager, married, 2 children, lives on the south side. Trevon Kyle, 35 years old, accountant, single, lives on the west side. Demetrius Landry, 39, warehouse supervisor, married, lives in the suburb of Berwyn. Kieran Ashworth, 43, manager at a logistics company, divorced, lives on the east side. Omari Blaylock, 37 years old, administrator at a medical center, married, lives on the north side. "Let's start with the closest one," Cresswell decided, looking at the map. "Demetrius Landry in Berwyn. Let's go to him." They got in the car and headed for the suburbs. Demetrius's house was a small, single-story building on a quiet street where row houses stood in neat rows and family minivans and sedans were parked in the driveways. When the detectives pulled up to the house, they noticed that the door was slightly ajar. Cresswell and Morrison exchanged glances, and both instinctively put their hands on their holsters. They got out of the car and cautiously approached the house. "Chicago Police!" Cresswell announced loudly. "Is anyone home?" There was no response. The detectives entered, keeping their weapons at the ready. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Newspapers lay scattered on the coffee table in the living room, and unwashed dishes sat in the kitchen sink. The television was off. They went further into the bedroom and saw him there. Demetrius Landry was lying on the floor next to the bed. His body was in the same position as Kiana's, on his back, arms outstretched. His shirt was soaked with blood. He had multiple stab wounds to his chest and stomach. His face was frozen in an expression of pain and surprise. "Damn," Cresswell cursed quietly. "We've got a serial killer." Tyra was already reaching for her phone to call the crime scene investigators and the medical examiner. She walked around the body, trying not to disturb the crime scene, and looked around. Same thing. No signs of forced entry. He let the killer in himself. And the same modus operandi. Multiple chaotic blows. A crime of passion. Cresswell crouched down next to the body. The blood had already begun to coagulate and darken. Judging by the condition of the body, he was killed around the same time as Kiana, maybe even on the same night, April 22nd. One killer, two victims in one night, Tyra said. And both victims are connected. This is no coincidence. Cresswell stood up and looked at his partner. His eyes reflected the same thought as hers. If the killer knew about Kiana and Demetrius, then he knows about the other three. Jalil, Trayvon, Kieran, Omari. One of them is either already dead or in danger. Or one of them is the killer, Tyra added quietly. The detectives returned to the living room and waited for the task force to arrive. Cresswell looked out the window at the quiet suburban street, where nothing indicated the tragedy that had occurred in one of the houses. Somewhere out there, in this huge city, was a man with a bloody knife. A man who had already killed twice. And perhaps he wasn't done yet. The day after Demetrius Landry's body was found, Detectives Cresswell and Morrison sat in Captain Raymond Holstead's office and reported on the progress of the investigation. The captain was a large man with graying temples and the tired look of a man who had seen too much in his career. He listened silently, nodding from time to time. "So, we have two victims killed on the same night," Cresswell summarized, standing at the board where photos of Kiana and Demetrius were attached. Both were stabbed to death, multiple wounds, clear signs of a crime of passion. The victims are connected. Demetrius was one of 5 men who were simultaneously in a relationship with Kiana Devereaux and providing for her financially. None of them knew about the others. "Until now," added Tyra, attaching photos of the other 4 men to the board. "We believe the killer is one of these 4, Jalil Butler, Trayvon Kyle, Kieran Ashworth, or Omari Blacklock. One of them somehow found out the truth about Kiana and decided to take revenge, to kill her and all her lovers." Captain Holstead frowned. "What makes you think that?" "The logic of events," Cresswell replied. "Kiana and Demetrius were killed on the same night. That's not a coincidence. The killer knew about their relationship. What's more, both of them let the killer in voluntarily, with no signs of forced entry. That means they knew him and didn't see him as a threat. Who could have known about Kiana and her lovers? Only one of the lovers themselves. Or a friend, the captain remarked. That Charisse Griffith. She knew all 5 of them. "We checked her alibi," Tyra said. "On the night of the murders, she was at home with her mother, who had come to visit her. Neighbors confirmed seeing both women on the evening of the 22nd. Besides, Charisse couldn't have physically committed these murders. She's short and not particularly strong, and the wounds on this victim's bodies indicate that the blows were delivered with great force. Okay, let's assume that one of these 4 is the killer. What do you suggest?" Cresswell and Morrison exchanged glances. They had already discussed this plan among themselves and knew it was risky. "We want to set up covert surveillance on all 4 men, Cresswell said. "Round the clock. If one of them tries to reach the others, we'll catch him." "Why not just warn them all?" the captain asked. "Tell them about the situation, take them into protective custody?" "Because then we'll scare the killer away," Tyra explained. "He'll go underground and we may never find him. And if he really plans to kill all of Kiana's lovers, sooner or later he'll make another attempt. We have to be ready." The captain was silent for a long time, thinking about their words. Then he sighed heavily. "This is a dangerous game. If something goes wrong, if someone else dies, it will be on our conscience." "We understand the risks," Cresswell said firmly. "But this is our best chance to catch the killer before he gets too far away." The captain nodded. "All right, you have 72 hours. If nothing happens during that time, we'll warn all 4 of them and take them into protective custody. Agreed?" "Agreed." By evening, a surveillance operation was in place. 4 teams of detectives, 2 pairs for each suspect. Cresswell and Morrison took charge of watching Jalil Butler, who lived on the south side of Chicago in a small 2-story house with his wife and 2 children. They parked half a block away from the house in an inconspicuous gray sedan that was easily lost among the other cars on the street. From there, they had a good view. They could see the front door, the the driveway, and most of the first floor through the windows. Jalil returned from work around 6 in the evening. He parked his car, took his briefcase out of the trunk, and entered the house. Through the windows, the detectives saw the lights come on in the living room, then in the kitchen. A normal evening for a normal family. "Maybe we're wrong," Tyra said quietly, sipping coffee from a thermos. "Maybe it's not one of them at all. Maybe it's someone else entirely." Cresswell shook his head. "No. Everything points to the killer being one of the lovers. There are too many coincidences. The method of murder, the time, the lack of signs of forced entry. This is personal. This is revenge." The hours dragged on slowly. Night fell, and the lights in Jalil's house began to go out one by one. First, the lights on the second floor went out. The children had gone to bed. Then the lights in the living room. By 11 o'clock, the whole house was plunged into darkness. The detectives continued their surveillance, periodically contacting other teams by radio. Everything was quiet at Trayvon's. At Kieran's, too. Omari was also at home. No movement. Around 1 in the morning, Cresswell was already dozing off when Tyra suddenly nudged him. "Look!" The side door of Jalil's house opened, and a man's figure appeared in the dim light of the street lamp. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans, with a baseball cap on his head. Jalil looked around, clearly checking for witnesses, then quickly walked to his car. "There he is," whispered Cresswell, now wide awake. "Let's follow him." Jalil started the car and drove out onto the street. The detectives followed at a safe distance, keeping several cars behind him. They contacted dispatch and reported his movements. "Subject number 1 is on the move, heading west on 87th Street, requesting backup." Jalil drove confidently, clearly knowing where he was going. He crossed several blocks, turned onto the main highway, and headed toward the western part of the city. Cresswell and Morrison exchanged glances. That was where Trayvon Kyle lived. "He's going to Trevor's," Tyra said into the radio. "Team 2, what's your position?" Detective Harris, who was watching Trevor's house, replied, "We're in position. Subject 2 is home, all quiet, ready to intercept." The drive took about 20 minutes. When they entered the neighborhood where Trayvon lived, Jalil slowed down and began looking for a place to park. He stopped 2 blocks from Trayvon's house, parking on the side of the road between 2 vans, where his car would be less conspicuous. Cresswell and Morrison stopped further away, turned off their headlights, and watched. Jalil got out of the car but did not head straight for Trayvon's house. Instead, he opened the trunk, took something out, and tucked it into his waistband, covering it with his jacket. Then he closed the trunk and walked down the street. "He's got a weapon," Tyra said tensely. "Probably a knife." "Team 2, he's coming your way. Get ready to arrest him, but not until he tries to break in. We need hard evidence." "Got it." Jalil walked quickly but cautiously, keeping to the shadows. He was clearly trying not to attract attention. When he reached Trayvon's house, a small 1-story building with a porch and a small backyard, he did not go to the front door. Instead, he walked around the side of the house and headed for the back. Cresswell and Morrison got out of the car and followed, keeping their hands on their holsters. The other 2 detectives from Team 2, Harris and his partner Lewis, also approached from the other side, surrounding the house. Jalil stopped at the back door. He took something that looked like a lockpick out of his pocket and began fiddling with the lock. A few seconds later, there was a soft click, and the door opened. Jalil took a knife from his belt, the long blade glinting in the moonlight, and went inside. "All teams, move in," Cresswell commanded into his radio. The detectives stormed the house from 2 sides. Cresswell and Morrison flew in through the back door, Harris and Lewis through the front. It was dark inside the house, but they managed to see Jalil making his way down the hallway toward the bedroom. "Police, stop! Drop your weapon!" Cresswell shouted, pointing his flashlight and gun at Jalil. Jalil spun around, and in the light of the flashlight, the detectives saw his face, distorted with rage and despair. For a second, it looked like he was going to lunge at them with the knife, but then he realized he didn't stand a chance. 4 detectives with guns pointed at him, and he was alone. The knife fell to the floor with a clang. "Hands behind your head! Get on your knees!" Tyra commanded, Jalil slowly dropped to his knees, and Harris immediately jumped on him, twisted his arms behind his back, and handcuffed him. At that moment, Trevon came out of the bedroom, confused and frightened, wearing only his underwear and a t-shirt. "What's going on? Who are you?" "What?" "Detective Morrison, Chicago Police Department." Tyra introduced herself, showing her badge. "You're safe, Mr. Kyle. This man tried to break into your house with the intent to harm you. We'll need to ask you a few questions." Travis stared at Jalil with wide eyes. "I don't even know him. Who is he? Why did he—" "We'll explain everything later," Cresswell interrupted. "Just stay here and don't touch anything. This is a crime scene." Jalil was led out of the house and put into a patrol car that had already pulled up to the house. The detectives confiscated the knife, a long kitchen knife with a blade about 18 centimeters long, which still had brown spots of dried blood on it. Forensic analysis would later confirm that it was the blood of Kiana Devereaux and Demetrius Landry. At the police station, in the interrogation room, Jalil Butler sat behind a metal table, handcuffed. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Cresswell and Morrison sat across from him. Between them stood a recording device, turned on. "Mr. Butler," Cresswell began in a calm, professional tone, "you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder of Trayvon Kyle and the murders of Kiana Devereaux and Demetrius Landry. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you free of charge. Do you understand your rights?" Jalil nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand." "Do you want an attorney?" Jalil shook his head. He stared at the table, avoiding the detective's gaze. "No. What's the point? You caught me. I know what's coming. I just want you to understand why I did it." Tyra leaned forward. "Then tell us, Jalil. Why did you kill Kiana?" Jalil took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. "I dated her for almost 2 years. I thought she loved me, that I was special to her. She told me I was the only one, that she had never loved anyone like that before. I believed her. I gave her money, helped her with rent, bought her gifts. And all that time, I was cheating on my wife, risking my family. But I thought it was worth it because she was the one who made me feel alive again." He fell silent, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "3 weeks ago, I started feeling sick. Fever, weakness, rash. I went to the doctor, got tested. And you know what they told me? That I have HIV. HIV. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I've always been careful, always. But then I realized that the only way I could have gotten it was from Kiana." Cresswell and Morrison were silent, letting him speak. "I went to her and asked her directly. At first she denied it, but I saw the truth in her eyes. Then she started crying, saying she didn't know, that she had only found out recently, that she wanted to tell me but was afraid. And then I asked if there was anyone else. Were there other men who could have infected her or whom she had infected?" He smiled bitterly. "She tried to lie. But I saw her phone on the table, grabbed it, and started reading her messages. And you know what I found? Correspondence with 4 other men. 4. The same words of love, the same promises she had made to me. She swore to each of them that he was the only one. I was just one of 5 fools who supported her." Jalil clenched his fists, and his voice became harsher. "I felt a rage I had never felt before. This woman didn't just cheat on me. She ruined my life. Because of her, I now have an incurable disease. Because of her, I will have to confess to my wife, tell her everything. My family will be destroyed. My career, my reputation, everything will be ruined. And all for what? For money? To live in a nice apartment?" "And you decided to kill her," Tyra said quietly. "I didn't plan it." Jalil shook his head. I left her apartment, got in my car, and drove home. But I couldn't think about anything else. All the next day at work, all I did was imagine her face, her lies, her betrayal. And the more I thought about it, the stronger my rage became. She infected me. She infected other men, and she didn't even feel remorse. To her, we were just sources of income. He raised his head and looked at the detectives. I decided she had to pay. And not just her. Everyone else, too. Those men who were as naive and foolish as I was. They slept with her, too. They could have been infected, too, and one of them could have infected her. In my mind, it seemed fair to get rid of everyone involved in this rotten business. Tell me what happened on April 22nd, Cresswell asked. Jalil leaned back in his chair. I took a kitchen knife from home. First, I went to Kiana's. I knew she would be home alone. She had no appointments that evening. I checked her calendar when I read her phone. I rang the doorbell, and she opened the door. She wasn't expecting me, but she let me in. She thought we were going to talk, but I wasn't going to talk. His voice became monotonous, detached, as if he were talking about someone else. I took out the knife and stabbed her. She didn't even have time to scream properly. Then I stabbed her again, and again. I couldn't stop. All that rage, all that pain, it came out with every stab. When I finally stopped, she was lying on the floor, and I realized she was dead. Tyra frowned. What about Demetrius Landry? I found his address in Kiana's phone. He didn't live far away. I drove there that same night. I knocked on the door and said I was a friend of Kiana's, that she was in trouble and had asked me to warn him. He let me in. And then I did the same thing. So you planned to kill all 5 of Kiana's lovers, Cresswell summarized. Yes, Jalil replied simply. I made a list. Demetrius was first because he lived closest. Then it was supposed to be Trayvon. After him, Kieran, and then Omari. I wanted to finish them all off in a week or 2. Then I would have left. Maybe I would have killed myself. I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead. A heavy silence hung in the room. Cresswell and Morrison looked at the man in front of them, a middle-aged father of 2 who, in a fit of rage, had become a murderer. Jalil's story was terrible, but in a way, understandable. He had been deceived, betrayed, infected with a deadly disease, and that pain had pushed him down the path of revenge. But that didn't justify his actions. Kiana was dead. Demetrius was dead, and Jalil would spend the rest of his life in prison. Mr. Butler, Tyra said, turning off the recorder, your testimony will be forwarded to the prosecutor. You will be charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder. I recommend that you get a lawyer. Jalil nodded without looking up. It doesn't matter. My life is already over. Whatever happens in court, I'm already dead inside. The detectives left the interrogation room. Captain Holstead was waiting for them in the hallway. Good work, he said. You caught him before he could kill anyone else. Not many operations end so successfully. Cresswell nodded wearily. 2 victims is already too many. But it could have been more, the captain reminded him. Thanks to you, 3 men are still alive. Tyra looked at her watch. It was almost 4 a.m. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. A new day in Chicago, the city waking up after a night when another killer had been taken off the streets. We'll have to notify the other 3, she said. Trevona, Kieran, and Omari. Tell them the whole truth about Kiana, about the danger they were in, and about HIV. Cresswell nodded. We'll take care of that tomorrow. Right now, let's go home. We need some rest.